And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Yuras. As every week, I'm joined by Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling this Friday evening for you?
Well, it's definitely getting cooler outside here, um, and it definitely feels like the fall is kicking in. So I'm looking forward to the holidays. I won't lie. It would be nice to have some kind of happy times right now and rest. But it's interesting because we're talking about today another case that's real close to where I live and kind of famous. And actually, it's funny because it's one even long before we had, or probably a year before we started our podcast. It was a show that was a big deal because I think it happened like right around my birthday. I remember, and it was right near me, and it was a place I knew well. So yeah, it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna be talking about the murder of Tristan Beaudette or Bodetta, whichever way you want to pronounce his last name. Before we start rolling here, I want to play a quick news coverage on this case for our audience members, so they could get better introduced into this week's topic. So I'm just gonna play it right now for you guys. I hope everyone enjoys this news coverage.
There's been a major development in the investigation into the murder of a father who was killed while camping with his two young daughters in California last June. Anthony Rauda was charged yesterday with 1 count of murder. He also faces 10 counts of attempted murder and 5 counts of burglary over a string of shootings that date back to 2016. Jamie Yukas is at Malibu Creek State Park in Calabasas, California, where the father was murdered. Jamie, good morning to you.
Good morning. Officials temporarily closed this very popular campground back in June when Tristan Beaudette was shot in the head as he lay sleeping with his 2 young daughters in a tent. The suspect has a lengthy criminal background, including illegal weapons possession, and apparently picked his victims at random.
Thank you, Your Honor. Max Santosi.
Anthony Rauda was blocked from cameras by his public defender as he appeared in a Los Angeles courtroom Monday. He was also in court back in November on burglary and parole violation charges. At that time, his unruly behavior led authorities to shackle him to a chair while wearing a spit mask. Authorities reportedly say the 42-year-old was a survivalist who lived off stolen food while often sleeping outside in the Malibu area. He now faces multiple charges, including the murder of 35-year-old Tristan Beaudette.
Sheriff's deputies responded to a 911 call where they found an adult male subject suffering from a gunshot wound.
Beaudette was gunned down last June in the tent he was sharing with his 2- and 4-year-old daughters. They were not injured, but are listed as victims of attempted murder in the felony complaint. In the days after the killing, more victims came forward after authorities revealed that several other shootings had occurred in the area.
Here's where it happened.
In June, James Rogers told us he was shot in the arm while sleeping in a hammock in the park.
I kind of assumed they were aiming for my head, to be honest, because I sleep with my arm up.
Melissa Tatangelo is also one of the victims named in the complaint against Rauda.
My boyfriend walked around and he was like, "That's a bullet hole." And I was like, "Okay, it is, right?"
Authorities released this photo when they arrested Rauda in October after spotting him on a ridgetop carrying a rifle in his backpack. He was suspected in a string of armed burglaries. Sources tell Los Angeles station KCBS that Rauda was positively identified in security videos while committing those crimes. And they say ballistics linked Rauda's gun to Beaudette's murder, as well as to at least 5 other shootings in the area. In court Monday, Rauda's bail was set at $1.1 million. He did not enter a plea, and he is expected to be back in court on later this month. Nora?
All right, Jamie, thank you so much.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the
There's been a
news
major
coverage.
development in the
My bad. That's the news coverage on the murder of Tristan Beaudette. And yeah, dude, as you've said, this kind of happened in your neck of the woods. This is Malibu, only what, like 20 minutes drive from where you live, right?
Yeah, and actually, where I grew up is even, maybe just over the hill from it. So it's really close. I mean, I used to go to lots of like kind of local restaurants and stuff around there all the time, and also, I've been to that specific state park. I have pictures on sale actually on stock photo, as well as just pictures that I have up, and some of which we'll show today from the area. It's very beautiful. It's kind of amazing when you drive into the area. It's really striking because it's an area you can kind of drive into from a couple different angles, and this is also the same area we were talking about with my Trees Richardson. I mean, it's just kind of to the south, I think. I get kind of turned around sometimes when I look at that area, but it's just adjacent to where my Trees Richardson died. And this place is a state park. It's got a long history of like film and television shooting there, like famous TV shows like MASH and the Roots miniseries, the original one, were filmed there. And it's really striking when you drive into the area. There's lots of good views. The mountains don't really look like California. They almost look like, I don't know, what I imagine maybe some parts of like Southeast Asia or China look like. So it's really weird scenery. And it's really beautiful. And the crazy part is it's right off the road. Like you're driving down like what is basically a kind of a mountain road that feeds out to the main highways. And there's just the state park, and there's like, I mean, especially when the weather's good and we don't have any drought, there's like all this nature packed into this little area. And it's quite accessible, and it's a really easy hike. Even it's a kind of amazing. You're showing right now. You showed a picture of. There's all this other scenery that's kind of adjacent to it. Like there's a Hindu temple that's sort of plopped right down there in the middle of Malibu. It's pretty awesome. There's a lot of like kind of private lands turned nice state lands now. And I mean, it's funny when you think of like Los Angeles, you don't really think of deer, but I've seen tons of deer in the area. And lots of other wildlife. It's a really neat place. So the other thing is, I know I've kind of may have sort of talked about this before on the Jared Negrete case when I talked to my Boy Scout background. So I've camped. I don't think I've camped I've actually camped at one of the other campgrounds we're going to talk about. But so right over the hill in Tapia Park, which was another incident that we're going to talk about today, kind of preceded this. But I've done a lot of I've done trail work in the area. I've taken my kid there for, both us having fun in the park and her doing school projects. It's definitely a place I've been to many times in the past. And the interesting thing is that it's really easy camping. Conversely, it's not like the kind of place you backpack into. Like literally you drive right off the road and there's all these campsites that are off like these huge parking lots. But it's still nice,
No, it's definitely nice. I was kind of interested to find out that such a place does exist in Malibu, because Malibu, is like, if you go by the stereotype, it's like, the really fancy place where it's almost like you get the feeling like it's all a gated community, even though I'm sure there is a gated community somewhere down there, but the scenery is more accessible to everyone, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, especially if someone had read the article that we both read, and there's lots of great articles on it, but there was a New Yorker article. So that's different than the New York Times. For anybody that isn't familiar with New Yorker, New Yorker is sort of like a long format, like weekly magazine, and it has usually pretty good journalism, or at least interesting journalism. I can't always attest that it's always 100% right, but I think what was interesting to me with this article was it kind of had an axe to grind. And that's like case in point. One of the things was that the article that describes the events, and I think does a good job of breaking open the story, as your clip that you played in the beginning of this episode hinted at, that there's sort of a deeper narrative going on than maybe just a crazy person running around trying to kill people. I think it's interesting that this person went on this long rant kind of about Malibu and how it's like the home of like has a lot of exclusive homes. That's true. It does have like a lot of mansions and a lot of, I mean, for Los Angeles County especially, or and sort of a Ventura. Well, it's adjacent to Ventura County. It has a lot of space for the money you pay relatively, or it did. Now it's become a lot more expensive. But that wasn't always the case. I mean, I personally know people who grew up in Malibu in like the 60s and 70s, and it was not at all land of the affluent. It was just the outskirts of Los Angeles. It was very rural. But nevertheless, okay, the reality is now it is a place where affluent people live. But that's really the case for many parts of Los Angeles. Many that are right in the middle of the city, like Beverly Hills. I mean, this is not that big a deal. I think the person tried to kind of craft maybe a little bit of a virtue signaling narrative around this, or maybe that was just maybe that was the foil. The foil was homelessness, which is sort of a topic that intersects with this. And the issue is that, I guess, the idea that you have all these really exclusive neighborhoods and then maybe no room for homeless people. It was a weird kind of axe to grind because the whole Los Angeles area, and in fact the state of California, as well as many other parts of the nation, has a massive homeless problem right now. And that's not me getting political. That's just an objective fact that there's a lot of people, and they've gone everywhere. So this is going to hinge into this because I've even seen some recent news that has sort of been in the same vein, and it has actually also been in Malibu, and it has to do with violence coming from looks like kind of like itinerant people that aren't necessarily like official residents of the community. So it was an interesting thing. So I think here's the thing. I'll start this off.
Mm-hmm.
When I started doing research for this case, even as a local, I had kind of a biased point of view because I heard about this lawsuit that the family of Tristan had come out the county with, and it was like it's got a big price tag attached to it. I think it was like 60 million or something like that. It was something
90 million
or 90. I mean, I don't know if that's gonna fly, but that's usually the tactic. I'll just say that's normal, is that you go high and then they meet you somewhere in the bottom third, maybe, unless for some reason the court system decides to punish as like punitive damages. So in this case, I really was like, well, how could the sheriff's department really be responsible for this nutty guy doing these crazy hit and run like Viet Cong raids in the hills? It's funny, it's not funny, but it's he almost like parodies my little statement about like how that place is my jungle. Well, for sure it was his jungle. Literally, he was running around it for years, apparently, making problems.
Yeah, exactly. And dude, there's a really good other news coverage done on this case where the news sources, they kind of talk about this specific problem, and I want to really quickly play it because it's another asset that I think will give a better insight into what's happening in this case. But there is a mystery still here that I want to discuss on the second portion of this podcast. But for now, let's just listen in to the second news coverage that I have prepared for everyone.
We are learning tonight that in a span of 2 years, there were reportedly 5 shootings near the Calabasas campground, where a father of 2 was killed last week. CBS 2's Amy Johnson has details.
And I'm highly dissatisfied with the lack of help I've received.
Cece Woods, a community activist and editor-in-chief of the local newspaper in Malibu, says she's surprised at how many people she's heard from since she started writing about the early morning shooting incidents at Malibu Creek State Park, the same place where 35-year-old Tristan Beaudette was shot and killed in his tent last Friday morning while camping with his 2 young daughters.
They are clearly unhappy with the lack of response from both departments.
Melissa Tangelo posted this on Facebook, a bullet in her car in January of 2017.
It's bird shots, so they're a little bit smaller. I think they're like 3mm diameter BBs, but it shoots 100 of them.
And James Rogers was shot in the arm while sleeping at the park in November of 2016.
He probably wouldn't have booked the campsite for his family.
The LA County Sheriff's Department has confirmed 3 shooting incidents near the park, including one just 4 days before Beaudette's murder.
Check the hood and notice the bullet hole.
Wood says she's heard about even more shootings, including this one that hit this white car driven by a 17-year-old girl, but she wishes everyone knew about them sooner.
If an alert had been issued to the public by the authorities, Tristan Beaudette may have made a different decision as far as his camping plans that night, and he may still be alive today.
The sheriff's department says they took all 3 reports they received seriously and investigated, but didn't see a connection. They didn't have jurisdiction over the park until after the murder. The state park spokesperson says they can't comment about why they didn't alert campers about those previous shootings. In Calabasas, Amy Johnson, CBS 2 News.
So yeah, this is what the CBS News is saying, that allegedly the police, they heard about the previous shootings that didn't end up in a murder per se, just bullet holes in various vehicles, and they didn't connect the dots. They thought that it was unrelated. Now this jumped out to me really much, to be honest, because I was thinking to myself, how often do cars receive strange bullet holes in the Malibu area across in the same general location in a very, let's say, narrow period of time? It kind of made me think that maybe the police was not willing to further investigate, and maybe even were slightly hoping that the problem will just go away somehow,
Yeah, and that's a great question, because that turned out to, at least according to this article we were talking about earlier, this turned out to be the case. And that I think was what surprised me, because of course I had heard nothing about it, nor had apparently a lot of people in the area. No idea. Drove through that place a bunch of times over the past 10 years, probably 100 times or something over 10 years. Never knew that there were all those problems going on there. And it looks like it's weird, because it kind of, when you look at the narrative in the New Yorker article, apparently there were some people, specifically some detectives, that were pretty interested in this, because they were getting these reports, and these reports were scary. They were like, not just vehicles getting hit, it was people getting shot in the night at campsites, or getting shot at, whether it was somebody in their little tent hammock thing getting shot, not even realizing they were shot. They thought they'd been bitten by an animal, until the little pellets started coming out of his arm the next day. The birdshot pellets. Yeah, which is scary. I mean, birdshot, by the way, is a horrible thing to get shot by. I know I've mentioned it in the past. It's birdshot is basically a bunch of tiny, tiny little pellets. It's meant to kill birds. When you're hunting, you don't want to shoot them with a pellet that's too big. It might rip it apart, right? So you want to kill it with just enough. Yeah. So it's not really good to shoot people with it, but it can be extremely painful in the emergency room to get it all removed if people actually know what's going on. That's not what happened in that case. But yeah, so this is interesting, is that there's like this ongoing series of events, and it's kind of weird too, because I mean, it is at a weird junction too, because it's a couple of different government agencies, which, like, you should say, good, there's more to like cover it, but maybe what if they both want to ignore it because they kind of think it's each other's problem, which is kind of what happened here, and kind of some, like you said, some denial about whether there really was a problem. And true enough, we've talked about this in my Treese Richardson and other episodes. There's a lot of people that need help in Los Angeles right now.
Yeah.
So no one had been killed yet, right? Knock on wood. And that unfortunately changed at some point.
Exactly, dude. And I have some posts, some social media posts posted by previous victims that were also allegedly terrorized by the man in question here, Anthony Rauda, the man who, we've seen on the first news coverage, right? The man accused of killing Tristan Beaudette. And now I want to quickly jump to those posts. So the first post is from the local Malibu. It's from that same news publishing website, I think, that we've listened to on the second news article. Then essentially this post from June 23rd, 2018, details a encounter that just happened days before Tristan Beaudette was killed. I want to quickly read it. That's what I'm trying to say here. So here I go. So new information, see the photo below, in which may have a connection to the shooting at Malibu Creek State Park. The driver of a Tesla was going over Malibu Canyon last Monday at approximately 4:30 a.m. near the temple when he heard a noise and his hood popped. He pulled over to put the hood down, and when he got to work, he noticed the hood was hit precisely by a bullet with the intention of popping the hood. The driver called the sheriff department and filed a report. Lost Hills has not yet came to inspect the vehicle. We did reach out to Lost Hills Sheriff's Department and have not yet heard back from Lieutenant Royal. As we now know, a camper was shot in the chest at approximately the same time 4 days later, not far from the temple. We very well could have a sniper or sicko on our hands, so it is vital that everyone be extra vigilant and aware of their surroundings. Most of all, be safe. So in a respect to this post stating a camper who was shot in the chest approximately the same time 4 days later. I think this is in reference definitely to Tristan Beaudette, and I don't think he got shot in the chest. I'm pretty sure he got shot in the head. Now, this article, this post was posted literally as the case was breaking, so maybe the latest details weren't yet available, but this does implicate something very heinous, right? Because if we would jump back to the map really quickly, dude, like this is the temple that post is referring to. This is the Malibu Hindu temple, right? And so a Tesla driver was driving past here as someone apparently shot a bullet. I'm not sure what kind of a bullet that was. Was that bird shot or was that shotgun shells? Who knows, right? But then at the same time, 4 days after this incident, because this happened on a Monday, 4 days later on a Friday, unaware of all of these things, because like this man did report it to the police on the same day, so the police could have been making public announcements that everyone should avoid this location because a potential rogue sniper is on the loose trying to injure people. Unaware of this, Tristan Beaudette, alongside with his, I think, brother-in-law, his kids, and then Tristan's own 2 daughters, went camping literally on the other side of the road from the Hindu temple, and then he got killed in the middle of the night. So, I don't know, like, seems like this is this, and then also the little incident, well, I wouldn't say it little, back in 2009 with Matrice Richardson. Lost Hills Sheriff Station seems to be a cursed police station where, some public cases, public cases that definitely harm the station's reputation takes place, right?
Yeah, we were discussing this earlier. The novel thing is that it's known as a slow station, meaning it's not slow like in terms of service, but slow in terms of it's not a high amount of incidents in the area. A lot of what you'll see that happens in the area, frankly, is a lot of like search and rescue and people getting injured, people going hiking, car accidents, whatever kind of minor nuisances happen around there's a lot of local businesses and there's schools and residences around, so I'm sure domestic stuff. But the 3 most famous things that happen around there, besides people living there, famous people living there like Justin Bieber and Will Smith and all these other folks, would be the Kobe Bryant by the way, I don't think we even mentioned that the Kobe Bryant thing is also just almost a stone's throw from this. It's just up the road. So that was our other episode that we did about that some time ago now. It's interesting. All this stuff seems to happen in the same place. But yeah, it makes you wonder because they're not so busy. So why couldn't they, spend some time on this? It just doesn't seem like they really wanted to focus much on it. Now there was one interesting quote it sounds like maybe the actual deputies did take it seriously because they were saying it was rumors in that article. That article mentioned rumors that some of the officers, when they would pass that area, would have their guns out ready to like blast if anybody took a shot at them from the woods there.
Jesus Christ!
I mean, that's pretty crazy if that really happened. If that really happened, that is like that's a totally different story, right?
Is this Malibu or is this Afghanistan? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Vietnam or something. It was going. I mean, in Vietnam during the war, waiting to get shot at, or yes, any kind of other area that has stuff going on like that. So, yeah, it's pretty fascinating to me. About how this was looked at and how this was dealt with, because it sounds like it basically wasn't dealt with. It kind of seems like they just thought they could either cover it up or look the other, or hope it went away. But unfortunately, you can't do both. If you're going to cover it up, you got to actually deal with it. Otherwise, why cover it up? Because something's going to happen if you don't actually solve the problem, right?
Exactly. I want to step in. I have a few more posts, right? So this is another post, I think, referring to the same incident. So I want to quickly read it. This past Monday, early morning, about 4:30 a.m., a driver was driving to work coming down the hill by the temple in Malibu Canyon, and the shooter shot precisely to pop his hood. He didn't realize what happened and pulled over to shut the hood and got back to the road. When he got to work, he realized the car had been shot and filed a report. The sheriff has not yet retrieved the bullet or interviewed him about the situation. I think there is a sicko out there that killed this guy with a straight bullet. Don't want to post this publicly, but Think News needs to get the scoop and inform the public. We are talking alternate routes until this is we are taking alternate routes until this is resolved. Insane. Twice in 1 week, right? So referring to the same Tesla driver. Now I have another post from Melis Tangelo. And I want to quickly read what she posted because apparently she's another victim of these shootings happening in the Malibu Hills. She says, I am one of those shootings. About a year and a half ago, I was shot at while sleeping in my car at this campground. The shooter used a shotgun with a slug, shot through my car from a point-blank range, and then took off. I came very, very close to being hit, but luckily I wasn't. When the police came, which took over 2 hours to show up, they told me, quote, "Things like this don't happen out here," end quote. I asked what they were going to do about it, and they told me they couldn't do anything. I asked if I had be dead, if they would have shown up sooner. Okay, this is a weird little sentence right there. They took the slug from my car for evidence and left. A few months after that happened, a friend of mine reached out telling me he was sleeping in a hammock around the same area a few months before my car was shot. In the middle of the night, while he was sleeping, someone walked up to him and shot him with a shotgun. They used pellets. He ended up going to the hospital to get the pellets removed from his arm and now has nerve damage in that arm. With both of those incidents happening over a year ago, you'd think they would step up security or something to make change, right? So there's more people reporting on these potential shootings happening even a year before Tristan is murdered. So what do you make of this, man?
Yeah, and that sounds like that might be the same case I was talking about with that one camper, where like I said, all that bird shot fell out of his arm. So yeah, I mean, this starts to tell a pretty, given all the people that were quoted in the article, all these kind of different similar claims in the same direction. It does seem clear that there was some kind of, it's really hard to tell if it was a mixture of like not wanting everybody to panic, because I don't know, this is such a long time ago. There was the DC snipers, what I can remember is kind of a recent case. I mean, these things do actually happen more frequently than you think. It's just sometimes it's not in such a high press area. But there's always been, I'll probably as long as there's been roads, there's been idiots that have been willing to throw rocks or do other things to cars going by. And same thing goes for, different kinds of crimes. This was so weird because, when it first happened, this guy, Tristan, was a really high level scientist. He's somebody that it really is such a waste to lose him for our society. I mean, let alone the tragedy to his family, but as a country or as a group of people, we really lose a lot when you lose someone like that. So they were wondering, like, what the heck is going on? Was he involved in something? He's a chemist. I mean, he has all these skills. Is he involved in something else? Was this a case of like competitor or organized crime, or like, he's involved in big business on the science level, and it didn't fit any kind of normal profile, right? He doesn't seem high risk, right? Compared to someone who's in a gang or organized crime or doing other activities. It's a really clean cut person off trying to do a camping trip right off, in a state park with his two little toddler daughters.
Yeah, exactly.
What the heck's going on? So this thing happens, and it's so weird. And I thought, they one of the stories I think you mentioned quoted said that he was shot in the chest. I believe he was actually just shot directly in the head, which seems to match the MO of some of the other attacks, because both in the case where the guy got shot in the arm, turned out his arm was actually wrapped around his head. He was using his arm as sort of like a pillow inside this hammock tent. So where his arm was shot was where his face was, right behind the arm. And same thing goes for this other guy that was in the camper, the RV. He had just gotten up because he heard a weird noise. He got up and got some water, just turned off the lights, and bam, right by where his head was, but it didn't penetrate all the way, was where the shot was. And I think it looks like the shotguns, like I said, they fire more than one kind of projectile. So there's the bird shot, but there's also the solid slug. And I think one of the ones you showed clearly looked like he was hit by a slug. You see how deep it was? It was like, what, almost an inch across, right?
Yeah, you're talking about this post? Nah, you're probably talking about something
It
else.
was one of them. It was like a big hole, like if I were to take my hands and make like a circle with my my index finger and thumb.
Yeah.
It was like that far across. That's not like a bullet. That's not a normal rifle bullet. That's a shotgun.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that will come into play in terms of like when they actually finally do decide to blame this on somebody, trying to match some of the weapons with what is found on this person.
I just want to quickly, because that was a definitely weird scenario for me. So as I've said, this is on the map for everyone who's watching this. We have the surrender location. So apparently they caught up to Anthony Rauda, the man allegedly responsible for these crimes, these assaults and attempted murders, and a bunch of other crimes of burglary, etc., somewhere down that little hill area. And it was weird to me how they located him. Essentially, I think, like, do you have more information on how they located Anthony Rauda? And also, do you think he is responsible for all of these crimes? Because I don't know. Like, wait, so Anthony Rauda, he was essentially booked not for the murder case. He was booked for burglary, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So it's interesting because he'd made quite a pest of himself, and maybe more over his lifetime. This wasn't Anthony's first, let's say, intersection with the law, but we'll see if it's his last. So he had this history of like he had break-ins and sort of antisocial destruction of property, fires, but he'd had a run-in with the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station at one point, I think, for some violence he had done. that he was drunk, and it kind of snowballed into a bigger thing. The reason why he was on their radar in the most immediate time frame to this was that there was kind of an ongoing series of break-ins at properties that were adjacent to this area. So it was interesting too, because the things that were taken, and this, I think maybe you'll see where I'm going with this in a bit, the things that were taken were useful to somebody who was camping, kind of living in the wild. If that's what you know what I mean? Like living out there, doing what they want to do. So, like he wouldn't take valuables, because you know what? When you're not actually ever going into town to buy things, or you're not exchanging stuff with other people. I mean, how do you even? It seemed like the person that did all the break-ins, and there was actually caught, I think, on some video footage. The person that was doing the break-ins, they only wanted things that you would use like on the trail. So they wouldn't, take money, but they would take food, they would take tools, and I would speculate that he also took weapons, because he was already a prohibited possessor due to a felony conviction much earlier in his life. So legally, he could not acquire firearms.
He had them on him. And okay, so I think one of the reasons why they caught up to him, because I think on the back of his, like, he had that back strap where and he had like a rifle on him. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they decided to investigate the guy. I think that was the case. So he was like essentially walking around the hills of Malibu like it was Afghanistan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was like Rambo running around in the hills, doing, if you've ever seen like First Blood or some movie like that, or other movies that are similar. Yeah, it's interesting, because if you look a little closer at Anthony's life, you'll see why he was living like this. And maybe it's no coincidence that it was sort of similar to sort of the survivalist type movies like First Blood, or, a movie, not that the character chose that in that movie, but you know what I mean? So if someone did choose this lifestyle, well, what kind of content would they be reading? And it turns out, almost exactly the kind of content that he was consuming from a very young age.
Exactly, dude. But I want to quickly talk about the whole murder, because how is he not getting caught initially? So this is one of the crime scene pictures. From what I reckon, this must be the tent of Tristan and his daughters, right? And essentially, how did this went down, dude? Do you think Anthony Rauda, in the middle of the night, because let's remember, this is all happening while everyone is sleeping, right? In the middle of the night, apparently he must have unzipped the tent and then like shot Anthony in the head while his daughters were left unharmed. So was he specifically trying to spare the daughters? What do you think is happening there?
Actually, as I understand it, I hope this is accurate. This is the way I always understood it. Think of the tent. Pretend, there's three people, an adult and two toddlers laying in a tent. So you figure people almost always lay with their feet towards the door. If that makes sense? You know what I mean? You unzip it. Okay. So you lay down, your head's towards the other end. That's pretty predictable. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody not do it that way in all the years of camping I've done. So I think this guy's MO, whoever did this, if he also did the other acts that he's accused of, seems to have to almost always do the shooting when there's something between them, either a car body or a car window or a wall, or in this case, and also in the hammock tent case, a tent. I don't know if this guy actually has the I don't mean this the good way. I don't know if he has the guts to actually look his victim in the face when he does it. I'm not even sure he knew who was in there, or that two other toddler kids were in there. I wouldn't be surprised if he literally just walked up and kind of on random said, well, this thing probably has somebody in it. Let's see if I get lucky this time, and took a shot.
Wow. That's crazy, because imagine one of the kids getting hit, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And so what happened was he actually went on this trip with his brother-in-law. So here's the context in their lives. He's the success. I mean, I can only imagine what their household income would have been and what their life trajectory would have been if this not happened, because he's this really successful pharmaceutical scientist. His wife is basically a doctor who's just taken a new job. She's sort of getting through, I think, some level of training, maybe finalization. I can't remember what the words, like residency or something like that. It was something where she had some more tests to take. In fact, the morning that she gets the bad news, she's actually ready to go take another medical test. She's about to take a new job in the Bay Area. They're about to move. They're packing up their house to move. So this is like kind of his last chance to take his daughters, who I don't know are a little young for camping. It's fine if they had a good time, to take them to this park before it becomes a big pain in the butt to go to. You know what I mean? Because it's about to be like 500 miles away. So, while you're living here, kind of in the Los Angeles area, I might as well knock it out now. It's such an easy camp out. That's the funny. I mean, that's the crazy part about this is, it is a really low difficulty. All your amenities are nearby. If you need groceries, Los Angeles is right over the hill, kind of set up, and there's lots of resources nearby. But it's still so nice. So yeah, so this happens. What happens is his brother-in-law, who's with him, kind of having the little farewell until from the area. He hears a noise and thinks it's a firework. He's like, "Who's setting off that weird firework?" And then the youngest daughter's crying, and the older daughter is trying to comfort her and shush her down, and she's saying, "Wet, wet." And the brother-in-law finally tries to figure out like why Tristan isn't waking up to like deal with this, because crying infant in camp, right? And he sticks his hand in there, and it's just wet. It's just blood everywhere, because when someone gets shot in the head, right, it's one of your most blood engorged organs, right?
Exactly.
And then all the blood comes out your head. So yeah, so I mean, obviously there's no I think they tried medical help, but it was too late. I mean, it was his head blown off basically. And it's so like his wife doesn't even really believe it. I mean, I don't blame her. When her sister comes to her door and she's like, you need to come with us. We need to come to the scene. You need to take charge of your daughter. The whole thing.
Exactly.
She's just like in shock. It's in fact, she never actually went back to the house. I think she never even. I don't think she never even moved into the house that they picked for them to move into. Up in the Bay Area, she ended up renting a place. She couldn't stand to go to the place that she essentially lost that life, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really tragic way because for Tristan to go, because he seemed like he was gonna do a lot of good work in the pharmaceutical business. You know what I mean? It's like really do some productive stuff in that field, and it was cut short by Anthony Rauda. Or was it Anthony Rauda? Like, that's the question I have here, man. Who did the killing? From what we gather, and from like some podcasts that I've listened to about Anthony Rauda, at least lately, the latest one that I've listened to, his defense attorney is very positive that he's gonna get Anthony off the hook, at least for the murder of Tristan, because apparently, if I'm not mistaken, the courts, they don't really have all that much linking Anthony to Tristan's murder. Is that correct, dude? Are you positive that Rauda is responsible for this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty convinced now. I mean, we'll break it down at the end, but just looking at it, he has this history of it seems like almost impulsive antisocial activity. So he had broken into a school and set a fire, and that was actually, I think, what he got his it was like a felony burglary conviction or something like that. So he'd spent some time in jail for that and for other things, for the drunken fight or something he'd gone into. That this was how he got wrapped up with Lost Hills. Now, growing up, it says I'm not even gonna say who it was. It was a specific brand of literature that was sort of like it's not sort of your normal like subgenre of fiction. It was sort of like a extremist, like survivalist kind of, you know, mountain man, modern mountain man on the run kind of breed of literature. So I think there's a combination of that. Is whatever his antisocial tendencies are. He may have some kind of mental illness. He definitely in court, he definitely doesn't seem to have been able to control himself very well, to the point where they've had to attach him to the chair, like handcuff him to the chair, or strap him down and put like a spit hood on him, so that they could even have him in court, or have him wheeled out of the court because he wouldn't keep his mouth shut. He has a problem. Now, here's something that's interesting is, he had this whole run-in, and he had a bunch of legal complaints. He had kind of a little minor legal battle against the Lost Hills Sheriff's Department, or Sheriff's Office, that office specifically, because he'd gotten in trouble in Agura adjacent to it, which is under part of their jurisdiction, I think, so like, the thing was, if he really wanted to be alone, which, is what he keeps insisting, oh, I'm just some poor man who just likes to live his life and be away from people and this and that. Why did you stay within walking? He has this big axe to grind, by the way, about the sheriff's department. Why did he stay within walking distance of the sheriff's department? You know what I mean? There's like a whole country full of woods. And he was sleeping right across from a really busy road. Now, here's where I'm going with this. All these other things that match up. The fact that he's running around with a gun in the hills. There's not really anyone else like him that's doing that. Yeah, there's other homeless people in the area, but they're really not Ramboing it up in the hills. They're like usually camping by like the beach, or they're staying by places, like supermarkets and urban areas, that are relatively easy. They're not roughing it. They're not roughing it in the hills of Malibu, which, we said in the My Trees Richardson episode. There are hazards in the area. It is like a dry, semi-desert, like a chaparral area. It's got very treacherous terrain. Not someplace you want to wander around at night or try to like live for any long period of time. It's rough. It's dry, and there's big fires and stuff. Okay, so what I've kind of noticed, this is going to be kind of one of my little theories, but I've seen this recently this year. Within the past 2 months of us doing this recording, there was an attack on a beach in Malibu. It was literally right next, I think, to like Jeffries and stuff, where we had to cover the other show. There's this one beach. It's really touristy, and some tourists showed up and did touristy things, right? Like you would expect. Come to the beach in Los Angeles, you pay your money, you go to the parking lot or whatever, you go in the beach. These two homeless guys, because we've had the Corona lockdown and all this other stuff going on, and a big change in how we're living life here in Los Angeles, for sure. These two homeless guys claim that it's their territory. This beach in Malibu, this tourist beach, and they attack the family with machetes. Yeah, with machetes. The guy, I think he one of his ears was almost chopped off. He lost an eye. The guy lost the dad. The dad lost an eye to these two homeless bustos, these two dumb bums, who, for some reason, I think because we've let things go so far, this isn't me getting political, it's like literally they were given so much rights that they shouldn't have had to camp on a beach that was really for tourists and really was public land. It belongs to all of us, not for them to try to extort. Anyway, so why am I talking about this? Well, first, it's the same area, right? It is covered by Lost Hills Sheriffs. But second of all, I've seen this kind of territorial behavior from, I'm just going to say it, homeless people that get entitled. They start to lose perspective about what their status is in society, but also even their right to live where they live. And it's really weird. They'll hole up in the, next to the train tracks or on the sidewalk, and they'll start to act like they own it. And I really start to wonder that this guy, despite all, on top of all the other factors we talked about, I think he started to get territorial. And maybe he wanted to make trouble for the sheriff's department. That's a plausible scenario to me, right? To embarrass them. But I don't know if it was that well thought out. I almost think he was looking, either he was getting territorial and these were people, it was always people that were trying to sleep on his territory, right? How he, in his twisted mind, for some reason, that whole area is his territory. This, public campground that he's not paying for, by the way. So I think it's that. I think it could also be he was bored. I could also be that he was trying to test himself. You know what I mean? There's a lot of like perverse reasons why someone could do something like that, because it's, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things he didn't do, right? He didn't like sexually assault somebody. He didn't try to kidnap somebody. He didn't try to steal money. He wasn't even necessarily stealing great property, though he did have a couple of, at least one good piece of property, like an AR, um, on him. He had like a black rifle on him, that I believe he must have stole somewhere. I would speculate that he stole a shotgun from a car or a dwelling or something like that adjacent to it. And it could have been something really cheap, like a single shot shotgun or something, because you notice it's always a single shot. And I bet you he didn't care about as much about that gun because it was like a $100 gun or something. Just stuffed it in the woods somewhere, and he would go find it every once in a while. Who cares if it got a little bit weathered? But here's what happened. He put it someplace where he could always deny it had anything to do with him. You know what I mean? So almost a perfect crime, except, he has to convince either a jury or a judge, depending on what he chooses, that it wasn't him that was running around while there's videos of what looks like him with a rifle around his back. But if he thinks he's going to deny it because he stuffed the shotgun in like a tree like a tree stump somewhere, well, here's the thing that sucks for us is it's probably gone. What happened was that whole area right after this period had a massive fire. In fact, in my pictures that happened about a year afterwards, I've taken pictures a couple of years in a row. My pictures, you can actually see the recovery of the terrain from the fire. It's amazing.
Are these some of the
Yep.
pictures I can find on Flickr, on your Flickr
Yeah,
account?
yeah, the Glen Hike of Flickr account. Yeah, and you can actually see if you look in some of the mountain scenes, or I have some other scenes, especially my stock photo. I have a lot of scenes where there's signs where the park people have actually marked off,
Okay.
for everybody that they can't walk in certain areas because they're trying to regrow the scenery there. But the crazy part is those hills are actually kind of made to burn down. It's just the houses around them are not.
Really quickly, I just want to ask, are these the pictures? Because I'm kind of curious
Yeah,
here
yeah,
with these
yeah, it is.
little fenced off areas, if I can say so.
Exactly. Yeah, that's recovery. That's nature recovering. We had a really good year that year where there was a lot of water. We had a beautiful butterfly migration season. There was a kind of an atypical butterfly season. There was a lot of butterflies in the area, but it was gorgeous. So yeah, it was good good times back then. Now
Whoa.
the creek is way lower now with the drought.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of work just to, manage the post-fire damages in the area.
Yeah, I mean it's true because when you have a big fire like that, you can have erosion, you can have roads, like you can have mudslides that carve away the road. Big rocks fall from the hills. They fall down on the road below it, so that there have been people that have been killed in kind of this part of Los Angeles County from things falling off of hills. And of course, we have all the usual wilderness. That was actually it was interesting during that period. We think that a mountain lion got pushed by the fire into my parents' neighborhood, which is sort of adjacent to this area, just because like the mountain lion couldn't stay where the fire was, so it started drifting over into the adjacent foothills.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So, you are pretty much certain that Anthony is responsible, and I will say, like, he's definitely the prime suspect. But I've heard something pretty strange during my research that apparently, at least the article or something like that, they state that there are still unreported shootings happening in the Dark Canyon area, which is literally adjacent to the location where Anthony Rauda allegedly murdered Tristan Beaudette, right? So my question to you, man, is there a chance that Anthony Rauda is actually not the culprit in this case? And is there a chance that there's still someone completely on the loose terrorizing the Malibu neighborhoods? And is there a chance that Lost Hills Sheriff Station is once again sleeping on their job?
I mean, that's what people worry about. They worry that it's a little bit too convenient. That's true. I mean, look, it makes sense that that if there was a problem, maybe you would want to try to blame, a bunch of problems on one case. It's always the claim that the police are looking to simplify their lives by finding somebody to push everything on. I don't know. I don't think so, because my question is, well, where's the other crimes that are like that since this guy got put in jail? So where's, you know what I mean?
Unreported by police.
True enough. I mean, that was the case before, right? It's not crazy, but then I guess the question is, all right, well, wouldn't it be more noticeable? Like, wouldn't they be trying to overcompensate now and say, oh no, we're taking you seriously. We screwed up. We don't want to get, we don't want to lose, the community support, and that's why we're here to say we're going to take you way more seriously this time. I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be naive. Maybe it's like the same thing again. But I don't think so. I think that now, especially now that it's become a lawsuit, I feel like those lawyers are going to be so keen to try to anybody that they can loop in to say, look, the sheriff still isn't doing their job.
Yeah, but how about this? How about Anthony Rauda is actually not responsible, but then the real person responsible for these terrorizations now switched their location, since it's a really hot zone now. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like there's an actual Rambo on the loose terrorizing people, I don't know, in like a different area of Los Angeles, of California, perhaps, you know what I mean?
That's plausible. I would say you still have to point to something that fits that pattern.
Of course.
So, I mean, of course, that being said, I'll be the first one to admit that news coverage is highly biased. We've said why that is before, but yeah, if there's not something really obvious going on, then it's kind of on everybody else to make the news aware of it. So I guess that's where, obviously, anybody listening right now, if you know something that we don't, and maybe the sheriff doesn't, that's obviously your cue to get involved and let them know if you know something like that happening. But yeah, to my knowledge, there's not really been anything else. Like the only problems they usually have, and are people going hiking or getting lost at the wrong time.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense now. Okay, so this is a really strange theory here, but I still want to bring it up on this week's show. Remember Matrice Richardson's case from 2009? Now, Matrice Richardson died under what some people think is very suspicious circumstances. And she died in the general vicinity now, albeit this is happening 10 years before Tristan is murdered. Well, not 10 years, let's say 9 years. Still, it's a wacky theory. Do you think that somehow Tristan's death and Matrice's death could be connected? Before I let you answer, I want to say that I don't think so, because it's like it just doesn't seem like that, and I personally think that there wasn't any foul play involved in Matrice Richardson's case, in my personal opinion, even though measures could have been taken to prevent her, untimely death. But, I think we have to address it still, because, it's the same location. The time is not really the same, but location is the same.
I believe that the timeline doesn't work because I think Anthony was either living in a different part of the U.S. or he could have even potentially been in jail.
If Anthony is responsible for Tristan's death, let's
right,
remember.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's true enough. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the question is, I don't, to me, it doesn't, well, especially in Matrice Richardson's case, they really didn't find anything, like there wasn't anything about the bones that looked like a bullet had impacted them. Like they did find some good amount of remains. I don't know that it was a perfect amount, but they didn't find anything specific that, like even I would say like lead balls or something that had come out of the body after the body had deteriorated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Exactly. And it seems like everyone who was targeted by this shooter in the hills, it was, there was always gun wounds or bullet holes involved in every single altercation. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't fit the MO. It's a wild theory. I'm sure they're not connected, but just wanted to throw that in. And yeah, dude. So for me personally, I think I'm looking at my notes. I don't really necessarily have any more info on this particular case, but I am interested still to hash out the theories. Before we move to the theories, I don't know, man, you have any more? Because you've been more active on the shared file with the notes this week, so I don't know. I don't want to run past any of your conclusions that you've made, even though you have given us a lot of great insights this week. Because you being a local, you definitely have a better understanding of this case.
Well, I hope I have at least some kind of unique insight. Though obviously I'm just one of millions of people in Los Angeles. But yeah, I've lived here a long time, and I've lived adjacent to the area, and I've watched the area change over time. But I feel like that state park being a pretty fun place to go has been one of the constants. So it's almost puzzling to me sometimes when I look and I'm like, gosh, what are all the things happening? And they're like several different disasters in a row in that area. It's just really weird because it's not it's not a crowded urban area, but stuff keeps happening. It's very strange. So yeah, I mean, I've covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about. I would say that it is interesting. You have to be careful of the press footage when you look at it, because they like the way the author of this New Yorker article, which otherwise is a really good article, tries to steer it in certain like kind of socioeconomic directions or political direction I don't think is appropriate. It's I'll say that besides all the places you can hike and all the public lands up there that are not housing, all of the beaches at Malibu, even there's even beaches that are blocked by houses that have like official public access trails and things. So there's definitely a lot of Malibu you can appreciate as someone who doesn't live there. I think I've already mentioned what I think happened to the shotgun, where it came from. I think that might be what the lawyer is pinning some of his hopes on, that he's like, well, there's no ballistic evidence, and he thinks he can probably throw up enough distractions to a jury to confuse them. I give him like a 50-50 chance on that, because I've seen definitely a lot of stupid jurors from having been on a jury several times myself. I mean, it's amazing how much people will give the benefit of the doubt, or lawyers can do a really good job, especially when you're isolated as a jury, on kind of getting in your head and making you sort of doubt yourself, or think there's not supposed to be any doubt, which is not the case. So okay.
Yeah.
All right. That being said, I mean, I think we've gone through the theories. If I were to think about like, well, what are the theories kind of are either Rauda did it, and why, like I said, it could be revenge against Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Seems a little stupid, but if he was already going to live like that, maybe he figured he might as well, kill a couple birds with one stone, camp out and kind of wage this campaign of terror. But I don't know. It's a little disturbing. He was willing to victimize other people, but then again, when the people are depersonalized, meaning he's not someone that's been convicted of crimes like robbing people or raping people or assault, things like that as much. I think he did have assault with that last robbery, but it wasn't this typical thing. But when it's depersonalized, like burglarizing somebody, isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
That if that was for what he was convicted of before, when he didn't have to look at the victim, then he was okay with it. So that's interesting to me. Territoriality, just doing that kind of homeless behavior where, whenever people live someplace, they start to get some ownership about it, even when it's not necessarily appropriate. So I would say, that's definitely the case here. If he was getting territorial, and I wouldn't be surprised given what they say some of his thoughts were, kind of growing up with the kind of literature he read. kind of like his philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so if it's not him, then it's like if it's someone else. Okay, that's like the second theory, because everyone, just think it's too convenient. But where are the other shootings? So I guess that's the question: is if there's other shootings in kind of similar areas. I mean, either this guy has completely changed his crimes, so that he's doing something that doesn't fit the pattern. You know what I mean? So he went from like camping. If it's not Rauda, it's somebody that went camping in rural areas adjacent to an urban area, and then was taking pot shots at people camping there. And I haven't heard of anything where they've, I mean, that would be what his defense would seize on.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for them. That's on them to show us. And meanwhile, he's been the only homeless guy they mentioned, and he does not represent himself well in court, which someone could argue, well, that's because he's mentally ill, and maybe that's what's going on. Maybe he's faking it, but he has really made a hard time for himself in the court system, and I don't know that he's doing a good job. At some point, like they're just going to railroad him through. So if that's his tactic, is just to cause problems until they give up, well, it's not going to work, I don't think. Like at some point they're going to get what they came from. Okay, so that's the for the second theory. And I mean, I can't really think of any other way to explain it, but if I were to kind of weigh the odds, I'd say, it's like 90% it's him.
Yeah, I think I will kind of agree with you here that I still am leaning towards that Anthony Rauda was, the man responsible for these killings. Well, for the killing and for the attempted murders. In the previous, terrorizing moments right there in the general location. A definitely interesting case this week, a little bit out of the norm. Next week, we already have a case planned to be completely out of the norm. Allegedly, as I understand, like next week's case is like really like dark and like messed up, like, and it's close to me again. It's close to my neck of the woods, so it's kind of funny how we're, well, not really as close as this is. It's not like a 20-minute drive, but it's in the same continent, you know what I mean? So at least I have that. And yeah, dude, I'm really excited about next week's case. But yeah, dude, anything you want to mention about this week's show before we sign out, man, to the audience?
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking about it. It was something that's definitely been on my mind since it happened, and I have been following the case, and I think everybody's outraged about what happened. I mean, the thing that really, if I had to kind of have a final thought, this is, I think, one of the things that disturbs me the most, if you look at the big picture about crime, is that, you have the case of somebody who had a really promising life and, was doing everything right. And really, like our society has invested a lot in that person and in his, kind of family, and then him having kids, and, they're being able to pay taxes and help us and develop, new medicines, which, at least in theory, pharmaceuticals should be helping us. This isn't always the case, as we've discussed in previous episodes, but the theory is nice that, that we would have better medicines to help cure things like cancer, et cetera. So I think that's always, whether we're talking about this or, 9/11 or terrorist attacks or any kind of like big picture ideas about crime or, destruction of people's lives. It's like, look at this Anthony Rauda guy. If it was him, I mean, he's like never been like really a productive citizen ever. Like he's always been a drain on society. And look, he's gone, and he's literally, it would have been really hard unless he, had gone after like a really important politician or something, or, a head of a business. It almost would have been harder for him to do more damage than he's done, short of doing like a big, massacre of a bunch of people. I mean, he by this one person he killed, and then presumably the people that he tried to kill, if he did it, he could have done a lot of damage. And I guess this always makes me wonder where this comes from what made this go set this guy off in this path, and it's not really clear.
Yeah, I agree. That's a nice wrap up, man. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this week's show. As I've said, really wacky case next. Well, I wouldn't say wacky, like really scary and crazy case next week, but I really hope everyone enjoyed this week's show. I hope everyone will have a great rest of the week. And yeah, we have some other ideas on the podcast in general moving forward. So we'll probably hint at those ideas later on, maybe next week. But for now, guys, please just stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll catch you on the next week's episode. And we'll see you soon. Stay safe and peace out.